I'm Paul Sheehan, executive editor of Gold Derby, and I'm here with Riley Chow.
Hello.
You know him as our stats guy, the below the line guy. Riley can explain to us about the Emmy nominations, what is going to win based on just all kinds of below the line information, just who underperformed, who overperformed. So let's turn it over to him and start with, I guess, on the drama side, Riley. Were you surprised how well Game of Thrones did, or did you think it was going to do better?
I think Game of Thrones did, I guess, on average, about as well as I thought. I was surprised that they got Maisie Williams in. I noticed that they underperformed in cinematography. Last year, they got 4 episodes nominated. This year, they only got 1.
Wow. And now you keep track of the submissions, and you wrote extensively about that in terms of vote splitting and all that. So with cinematography, I mean, do you know how many they submitted this year?
Yeah, they submitted 5 last year and this year. At first, when I saw they only had gotten 1 nomination this year, I thought, oh, okay, it's because last year there was actually a double tie that resulted in 7 nominees.
Right.
So they had 4 episodes of Game of Thrones and 3 other shows. Whereas this year, they just went with 7 completely different shows.
So there was 7 again this year?
Yeah.
Wow. So, and
ironically, this will actually make it very easy for Game of Thrones to win because it won't have to deal with vote splitting.
Okay. And did the winner from last year, is that Lenzer back, or is it somebody new?
No, last year was Boardwalk Empire, so they're gone.
Oh, you mean, Game of Thrones didn't win?
No, I think they had too many episodes, so you can't split the vote 4 ways like that.
Oh, I just, with that whole sort of in my head, with that Game of Thrones had won so many, I just assumed they'd won. Oh, okay. So now you mentioned Maisie Williams. Now, also, I think you must have been very pleased at the directing nominations for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was very nice to see that Miguel Sapochnik get nominated after he was snubbed last year because of his lack of name recognition. So he should be able to win.
Yeah, you wrote about that extensively and about so how many of his Game of Thrones colleagues is he up against?
Just 1, so there shouldn't be too much vote splitting there.
Okay.
I keep mentioning vote splitting because this year is the first time that voters are only marking off 1 winner per ballot, whereas in the past they would rank them, so you could kind of avoid that. Whereas I think that'll factor into many races this year.
So now it's really, it's like what they used to do was what they do over at the Academy Awards just for Best Picture, ranking.
Exactly.
And now it's what they do at the Oscars for every other category, so you just get 1 choice, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness. That is, I mean, last year we were sort of grappling with, will the expanded potential voter pool make a difference? Now we've got this new element of just 1 X marking the spot. What do you think is going to happen? Will it be kind of a sweep where every time they see Game of Thrones, they're going to check it on the drama side, or?
I think they'll try, but I think they'll run into some problems in supporting actress, where you've got Emilia Clarke, who's playing the more popular character. You've got Lena Headey playing she's a more respected actress, and then also Maisie Williams might take a few votes. So I think that'll clear the path for Maggie Smith. Oh,
okay. All right. Well, that would delight me. I'm a big Downton fan, as you know. But just going back below the line for a sec. So what about writing? I mean, it's the Game of Thrones is the showrunners are the only, they submit. Do they do every episode? Is that, or?
No, they don't do every episode. And because there are 2 of them, they actually have the option of each submitting an episode, even though the episodes will have the same credit. But they've only submitted 1 episode every year, except for the 2nd season when they submitted all their writers. And that was the only year that they haven't been nominated. So I think they still feel burned by that. And it might also be that now with just submitting 1 episode, then they won't risk any vote splitting. So the win will be very easy.
And I think that you just mentioned that I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. So you're Riley Chow and you're a member of the writers branch. And so you have to pick say, if you work on a couple of shows, you get to pick 1 episode from each of the shows you work on. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
But you only get 1 choice. You get 1. So if you've done 10 episodes, you have to pick your 1. So it's interesting. It's sort of like, I mean, the actors, other than guests, do this after the fact, but all the craft people have to do it before the fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is comparable to the actors, though. Like, you wouldn't have an actor nominated for different episodes of the same show.
Right. I guess in the old days, and a few years ago, the supporting actor people would get, 2 episodes, and then they'd put together a reel. Does that sound right?
Yeah, they used to edit the episodes down too to just their scenes, but none of that anymore.
Right. Now everyone's got DVRs; they can just fast forward.
Yes.
So Game of Thrones, it's a big player. But do you see when you look at the rest of the drama race? Who do you think, or what series do you think are the biggest threats to Game of Thrones not winning again?
Well, I think Game of Thrones has it easier than it did last year. I'd say its biggest competition is House of Cards, but House of Cards has not been nominated for writing, directing, or editing the last 2 years. So that's not a very strong competitor. And then you also have Downton Abbey, which has its final season, is up for writing and directing, but it severely underperformed in acting nominations.
Yeah, now why do you think that was? I mean, we talked about beforehand, and the Jim Carter rule. Basically, if you see Jim Carter's name, put it down, because every year he would get a nomination. And by the way, I got to point out to people, Riley's the one that would hold us accountable. He'd always, year in and year out, would be saying, Gold Derby, you're underestimating Downton Abbey. You're underestimating Downton Abbey. So this year, I finally listened to you, Riley, and put it in a lot of places. And
gone too far. Yeah.
It was too late. Why do you think that was? That it just didn't. That those actors that they've embraced in the past, they rejected this year.
I guess I'm not too sure why, but I did notice that there is kind of a disconnect between branches this year. Where House of Cards, that's a show that, like I said, no writing, directing, editing. But this year they have more acting nominations than ever. They still have their cinematography nomination. They're still in casting. And Downton Abbey was the same thing. They're stronger than they have been in several years below the line. And with the acting branch, not so much.
And especially, it's interesting because as I now I'm going to get it wrong, but didn't Downton win SAG Ensemble?
They did. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And
last 2 years.
Yeah. And that the acting branch, the Actors Union embraced them. It was surprising that the acting branch of the Academy wouldn't have likewise, especially when we'd seen people like Joanne Froggatt get in, which was somewhat of a surprise last year, especially over Maggie Smith. So, but it's interesting when you mention House of Cards, because, I mean, I didn't know some of those names that got nominated for guest acting. I mean, it was in the sense that, it belies we all think, oh, well, they're just going to tick off the famous names. So it just goes to show that the acting branch, at least, is watching House of Cards, doesn't it?
Yeah, I find that there are two ways to get a guest nomination these days. Either you're a really big name or you're kind of a pseudo-regular on a show, where maybe you had to submit supporting in past seasons, and then this year you're submitting guests because you happen to be one episode off or so. So that's what all those House of Cards people are. Like, people who watch House of Cards have seen those people for years, and instead of voting, a big name in something they haven't seen, they're more comfortable voting for a character that they know, I suppose.
Well, and since Peter McNichol lost his guest acting, just to explain to people what the nuance is then between when you're a guest star and you're a supporting player on the show.
Sure. So as of last year, if you are in half of the season's episodes for any amount of time in those episodes, then you're ineligible as a guest star. And this was a response to people like Uzo Aduba and John Lithgow, who would win guest Emmys even though they're in every single episode of the season.
Right. So the idea being they wanted a true guest star, and you actually were the one that first brought it to our attention that Peter McNichol, his IMDb listing is 5 episodes, and as you just said, any amount of time, because the 5th episode, and I think when he submitted his entry in May, he didn't realize he was going to his footage of him would be in the documentary element of one of the episodes still to come. So it's such a shame that he's lost his nomination for a few seconds of screen time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, I have nothing against Peter McNichol. It's just that you have people like Diana Rigg who are also in 5 of 10 episodes. She was nominated last year. So you'd assume that she'd be nominated this year, and I would hope at the expense of Margaret Martindale. So yeah, I think rules should be applied consistently, whatever they are.
Right. It just the fact that it's only a few seconds. And then I suppose you get into, well, 15 seconds, 30, when do you draw the line, So Diana Rigg, because she was in 5 of 10, had to submit in supporting.
Yeah, and then they just didn't submit her at all.
And that's interesting. How do you go to Dame Diana Rigg and say, we're not putting your name into contention? Remember those Emmys you went to a couple of times? Yeah, don't buy a dress. Because they how many supporting people did they submit? Do you remember on the actress side?
Game of Thrones is very selective. I find they're actually too selective, where they actually don't submit, like they didn't submit any guest actresses this year, and they only submitted 1 guest actor. Like we just saw with House of Cards, you don't have to have name recognition. You just have to be somebody that voters are familiar with if they actually watch the show. Like they should be getting people like Varys and Littlefinger nominations, I think. On the supporting actor side, they submitted 3 that got nominated, as well as Sophie Turner, and then Carice Van Houten also submitted herself.
Oh, of course, because that's the other thing. You can submit yourself. I guess you have to know, though. You'd have to sort of be going, because I remember on Downton, you get these DVDs for your consideration, and it's the same thing, especially below stairs. Very few of the people below stairs were being submitted. Like, I remember being surprised that Barrow, Rob James Collier, wasn't submitted this year for the final season, and I thought he had a very strong storyline. So,
yeah, Downton Abbey is very selective. Like they didn't submit Jim Carter that first year, which is the only other year that he was snubbed.
Oh, oh boy, isn't that something? So when they put his name on, so you're sort of saying you're going to be shocked if Game of Thrones doesn't win series.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now
it's interesting next year too, because Game of Thrones is leaving, and
right.
Like there's not really anything to take its place. Like I said, House of Cards seems strong because it has its 8 acting nominations, but no writing, directing, editing for the last few years. Suddenly going to be a series winner, that doesn't seem right. And then you've got Mr. Robot and The Americans, which I look at because those shows are actually on an upswing at the Emmys. But again, they're both missing several key nominations.
Well, we don't. I mean, and who knows what the fall season will have for us? There could be something red hot.
It has to be.
Yeah, you mentioned House of Cards and Mr. Robot, both drama series nominees, but I think their big race is going to be drama actor, don't you think? Kevin Spacey versus Rami Malek.
Yeah.
And or are you betting on someone else?
No, I think it's just Kevin Spacey.
And why is it just Kevin Spacey? I mean, he hasn't won the first couple of times.
He hasn't won. He's been up against some weird circumstances. First of all, he had to go up against the tape system. He almost never has a very strong episode, or when he does, he submits something else. And then he had to deal with the final season of Mad Men. But along the way, he's been winning, Golden Globes, SAG Awards. So.
Well, right, but then, and the tape system was up until, even now, you still name an episode, but just until last year, people had to put their hands up and they'd get sent all the episodes and watch them. But if he's won all these other awards and not an Emmy, why will he suddenly be winning an Emmy?
Because the people who beat him are out of contention. There's no more Jeff Daniels, there's no more Bryan Cranston, no more John Hamm. So maybe he's been 4th for the last few years, but this year that means 1st.
Well, but so you don't think Rami Malek, sort of a rising star in a red hot show that's airing new episodes during Emmy voting?
I think House of Cards has 8 acting nominations, and Mr. Robot has 1. So.
All right, okay. I've got Rami right now. But
okay, yeah. Well, so why is that then?
Because of what I just said. I think that during voting, everyone's talking about it. Hot star, okay. And I can't help but wonder why Kevin Spacey hasn't ever won an Emmy. Why he's suddenly going to. What about on drama actress?
Drama actress, I thought that I would just predict Viola Davis because she won SAG, but I found that as I was making my predictions in the prediction center, which is actually very similar to how the Emmys vote now, they click one, then they move on to the next category. I found it very hard to click Kevin Spacey and then not click Robin Wright, when the show is seen so much these days as a two-hander where they're equals, and Robin Wright is variably more respected for her acting in the show. So I thought that if I'm predicting Kevin Spacey, I should predict Robin Wright too. Whereas last year they were voting John Hamm, so they were able to vote Viola Davis. And also, sorry.
No, you go.
Oh, and then also with the new system, we don't know if Viola Davis was able to pick up a lot of number 2, number 3 votes last year from people who don't watch her show but might respect her as an actress or remember her from the movies that she's been in. Whereas this year they can only choose one, and I think they're more likely to go with a show that they actually watch, which is House of Cards.
And also, I think that there was a sense of the historic element of it last year. The fact that there'd never been an African American to win that race. So yeah, I think that, and then of course Juliana Margulies not being in, I think is because if she had been nominated, would you have picked her?
No, The Good Wife though, that's another one where we saw a disconnect where the actors dropped it, but they got their first ever costume nomination. They got into writing for the first time in 6 years. The Emmys, one side's not talking to the other.
And they had adored The Good Wife. I mean, Christine Baranski, a perennial nominee, Julianne Margulies, but on and off. But when she got
Alan Cumming,
when she got in, she won a couple. Josh Charles, I mean, Alan Cumming, Arjun Punjabi won way back when. Guest upon guest upon guest. It is. Boy, when they drop, when you're dead to them, you're dead to them. I mean, it's.
They usually come back for the final season, which is not what we saw this year, which is strange.
And it's so disheartening because as Juliana Margulies mentioned, oftentimes, their broadcast show, they did 22 or 24 episodes a year, and that's a lot of TV. I know House of Cards and some of the others do into the double digits, but Downton I think is 8 or 9. It's a lot. You've got more time to craft these shows, but when you're doing it 22 or 24 episodes. What about down in supporting? Who do you sort of favor on the supporting actor side in drama?
Supporting actor is tricky because you've got Peter Dinklage, who's, again, the more respected actor, and Kit Harington, who's playing the more popular character right now. I just tried to play it safe, and I thought the Emmys are going to go with Peter Dinklage because he's the more famous name. Who do you have?
I think Kit Harington. Right now, just because it just seems to be, well, I guess his year and that he got the nomination.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's sort of one of those things. But of course, I was saying that a few months ago about Sylvester Stallone. Well, if he gets the nomination, he'll win for Creed. So what do I know? What about supporting actress?
Supporting actress, yeah, probably the vote split. So.
Yeah, we talked about Maggie Smith, and maybe she'll come. Probably not, but maybe it would be nice. She didn't go to the Globes when she might have won, so I doubt that they'll see her. But they don't care. It doesn't seem like the TV Academy cares. I mean, there'll often be times that the winners aren't there. They don't. It's not the same kind of compulsory attendance that the Oscars are.
Well, Maggie Smith has won at SAG. She's won at the Globes. She's won at the Emmys, and she's never there. So
right, yeah. Then, do you directing? You think will go to Game of Thrones?
Yeah, Game of Thrones seems to have the sweep where we didn't necessarily see it at the guilds later on, but I think the Emmys kind of get into this bubble where all the campaigning is targeted at all the voters, so it seems like there's a sweep effect even if voters aren't voting across branches.
So what below the line categories do you think Game of Thrones is going to lose?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I guess. No, I don't know. They should clean up pretty well.
Okay, I put you on the spot with that. Let's shift over to comedy.
I like in the below the line categories this year, though, where above the line they kind of double down on Game of Thrones, on House of Cards, but below the line they try to acknowledge a lot more shows. You've got Narcos in editing, you've got Ray Donovan in sound mixing, you've got various shows in cinematography. I really like that they spread the wealth this year.
And that's branch by branch. So what? So Veep, do you think it's sort of it's a slam dunk to win Best Comedy Series again?
I don't think it's a slam dunk at all, but I think that you still need to predict Veep because it does have the most nominations. It got nominated everywhere it needs to, and it won last year. But I think there are a few very good reasons for an upset. First I'll talk about Silicon Valley, which even though it only has 11 nominations, but
I'm just going to stop you for a second.
Okay, sure.
Because to again give you a shout out. 2 years ago, I remember you saying all of you are underestimating Silicon Valley, and we dismissed you. Riley, it's not going to get nominated for comedy, and it got nominated. Last year, you sort of said the same thing, guys. It got nominated last year. So, and sure enough, it was back. So anyway, so you have been championing Silicon Valley since day one. So continue.
You've been championing me, so thanks. Silicon Valley, they got all the same nominations as Veep. They only have 11 compared to Veep's 16. But they don't have a supporting actress that is worth voting for, kind of.
Right.
Whereas Veep, so they're in that category. Silicon Valley didn't submit any guests, so they didn't get any guest actor nominations. And Veep got 3 episodes nominated for directing, but Silicon Valley only submitted 2. So if you take those out, then the only advantage that Veep has is its 2 supporting actors versus 0 for Silicon Valley. But both of them got double editing. They both got series, casting, production design, double writing, multiple episodes in directing. So they're actually they're much more even than the totals suggest.
Wow. And also, I was surprised. I saw some ratings the other day at how highly viewed Silicon Valley is.
Oh yeah. It retains that Game of Thrones audience, and then people leave for Veep, and then the ratings actually go back up again when Last Week Tonight comes on, because those all air on the same night.
Right. Wow. So that's another factor. I mean, that people have been watching it and like it, obviously. And now, I remember when you did your Guild scorecard, you referenced that Transparent had done quite well with the guilds, which, again, a lot of explain the calendars, because the guilds the awards that are really driven by the film industry that happen at the beginning of the year, how do they mesh up with the calendar for the Emmys?
Yeah, the guilds generally use a different calendar. They use January to December, whereas the Emmys use June to May. So that kind of messes things up a little bit. But you have a lot of the same voters voting on both awards, and it's not about the guilds influencing the Emmys, because nothing influences the Emmys. It's just that the same people like the same things.
Mm-hmm. But Transparent had done, I remember when you did your scorecard, Transparent had done very well at the guilds.
Yeah, Transparent won the Guild Award for Best Comedy Series over Veep. And it was only the second time in the last 10 years that that's actually happened.
The Producers Guild. The Producers Guild. Yeah. Right. So how did you think Transparent fared then at these Emmys in terms of nominations?
Yeah, it did pretty poorly. I mean, going into the Emmys, I thought there's a chance that it'll get snubbed for writing, for editing, because they submitted too many episodes, and because those branches have kind of a historical bias towards sitcoms over dramedies.
Right.
But still, they didn't get Angelica Houston in, and they didn't get a supporting actor in. And even though I can make excuses for those writing and editing snubs, ultimately they were snubbed, and that's not great for winning comedy series. But I do think that Transparent has a couple of paths to an upset. First of all is that they won the Producers Guild Award, I think largely because of the voting system, whereas they're so dramatic that if you're an Emmy voter and you don't like dramas competing in comedy categories for obvious reasons, then you might just mark it down in 7th place. Right. Whereas Veep I'd say the lowest it would go is 6th for those types of people. So that'll have a better average. But the new theory that I have is actually that Veep and Silicon Valley are in danger of splitting the vote between the two of them, because they're both HBO satires that air, in the 10 o'clock hour from April to June. I think a lot of the same people are taking off both of these shows because they watch them together, and they have all the same nominations essentially. So I'm sure that the Veep and Silicon Valley crowd is larger than the Transparent crowd, but are they twice as large? That I'm not sure about. And this is the first year again where we're going to see vote splitting, and we normally think about vote splitting between shows like the episodes that they have, but we could also see similar series splitting votes with.
But now, you were talking about the 6 and 7. That's at the PGA. They did a preferential ballot.
No, PGA they took off one. Sorry.
Oh, they took off one. Okay, sorry. So PGA ticks off. Oh, they use the preferential ballot that the Oscars do for their picture, but not on the TV side.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, but when you were saying 6 and 7, that you're talking about the last year for Veep and Transparent, because that's now off the table for the
Sorry, that was a little confusing, but basically I think that Transparent will fare better in a vote where you only have to take off one. Because they might have their core crowd, and this year with 7 nominees, Transparent could have 15% supporting it, and 85% of people hate it, and that would still be enough.
And is there something to being the orange in the barrel of apples, like the fact that it is the dramedy versus some of the other nominees? It does stand out in a way, like you said, and it doesn't necessarily need more than 20% of the vote, kind of.
Sure.
Yeah. What now? Okay, so Veep may be in trouble. I mean, potentially, you won't be shocked if some other show.
I'm not going to predict something else, but
okay. Now, are you going to predict somebody other than Julia Louis-Dreyfus?
No, I think she's locked.
Yeah, I think that one is locked and loaded. What about comedy actor?
Comedy actor, yeah. I think it's the same thing. There's actually a very interesting thread in the Gold Derby forums right now by this person, JJ Moss, where they ask, will we have a repeat of all of the comedy winners from last year in series, lead and supporting acting, writing, directing? And I looked at that title, I looked at my predictions, and I thought, oh, actually, yeah, that's what I am predicting. I think we will have an exact repeat. Okay,
so then you've got Allison Janney winning. So Julia Louis-Dreyfus gets the record for the most comedy actress wins ever. Allison Janney then gets up to number 8, tying Cloris Leachman. You're thinking Allison Janney is going to win for Mom?
Yeah, Allison Janney, I always want to predict somebody else. Last year I did. But her competition is just not as stacked as I would like it to be, because I don't think that voters are watching Mom. And I think they are watching Veep, but Anna Klumsky had much less to do this season than last year when she lost. So it's hard to imagine her getting caught up in the sweep there.
And did you predict Anna Klumsky last year?
No, I went with Gabby Hoffman.
Oh, okay, okay. And so now, not Judith Light this year then? Just to stick.
Well, Transparent, that's another show that the Emmys are kind of watching, but there you have 2 of them nominated. So
right. I'd like to. I mean, that's we have the Gold Derby Awards, and we'll have our Dream Ballot launch soon. I would put Judith Light in there because I would love for Judith Light to win.
Are you predicting her as well for the Emmy?
No, but I was talking about on the dream side. We can have our dreams. What about sort of the big movie mini races? Fargo, is it in your mind Fargo versus OJ for Best Limited Series?
No, I think OJ has it. They got their 22 nominations, or 23 if you want to count their online tie-in. That's much more than I was expecting. They nominated it in places like costume design, and they nominated as many writers, as many directors as they could.
Okay, so that's, and then TV movie. I mean, are you all the way in for All the Way, or?
Yes, and I also think that a lot of people are jumping over to the Courtney B. Vance train because OJ is so beloved now.
Right.
And I think at this point people are getting a little tired of Bryan Cranston, but I think that's just an online thing. I'm tired of him winning too, but I think when they open the envelope and they say Bryan Cranston, I think there's going to be a very large collective like, oh, that was so obvious. Why did I not just predict Bryan Cranston?
Well, it was interesting. I published an item the other day, and just looking at the photo of Bryan Cranston, going, "Oh my goodness, does that ever look like LBJ?" Like just something so. It sounds silly, but it's like the fact that it's so different from Walter White. I mean, and also, it's a TV movie. It's they may not have watched all the episodes of OJ, but they're more likely to have watched, a 2-hour telefilm. What about actress then in a movie or limited series?
I think we all have Sarah Paulson there.
You don't think the Gold Derby curse that we keep predicting her to win and then she doesn't will befall her again?
Well, I like what people are saying about Lily Taylor, and that there are a lot of parallels with her and Regina King, where they're these long working character actresses in American crime, possibly taking down Sarah Paulson.
Now, what about Regina King, though, in supporting? Could she win again?
Yeah, I think it'll be either her or Sarah Paulson on a Sarah Paulson wave. I mean, last year we saw John Hamm and Allison Janney didn't win their secondary nominations in guest.
Right.
But we also saw more recently at SEG where Idris Elba was able to win on the TV side and the movie side, and they were using plurality voting, so maybe that's more relevant.
Oh, okay. And it's funny, I think of the old days, Stockard Channing. I think she hadn't won ever, and then she won 2 in the same night. I think for West Wing and the Matthew Shepard story. What did I? Oh no, I didn't ask you about supporting actor in a movie or mini series.
I think it'll be Sterling K. Brown. Just like there are 3 of them nominated, but I think OJ is so far ahead of the rest of the pack there.
Okay, and then do you think will it get directing and writing as well, OJ?
Yeah, I'm a little more hesitant there because I think there's going to be some episode confusion where they want to vote for the pilot, but it doesn't have a good title. Like it's not as eye-catching as The Race Card or Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. So there could be some vote splitting there, but right now I'm banking on OJ just being so far ahead of everybody else that it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting. And we're still 2 months away. So I have lots to write about and talk about.
Yeah. But so I'm expecting some very boring Emmys. I think Game of Thrones will win everything. OJ will win everything, and we'll have the exact same comedy winners as last year. So.
But I think that as we get there, we can make it interesting by as we talk about all the possibilities. As you said, it's very much like the election when you talk about the different paths to victory. So I will say that I think a lot of people thought that this coming presidential election was going to be boring, and it's turned out to be anything but. So you never know. The Emmys could be just as exciting. Well, thanks for giving us your insight on all of this, Riley, and we'll talk to you again as Emmy season continues.
Thanks for having me.